Last week, the Rio Grande within the Albuquerque reach started to dry. On Monday, there were 5 miles dry in the city, 12 miles dry near Las Lunas, and 32 in the Socorro area. Upstream rains, they'll re-wet the river here and there, but this drying will keep happening throughout the summer and the fall. The state of the Rio Grande is something we've long covered. The river in southern New Mexico is dry much of the year, and more summers than not in the past 20. The Middle Rio Grande has dried downstream of Albuquerque. But this year, this is the first time in decades the Albuquerque stretch has turned to sand. It's by no means unexpected, though the sight of that empty channel is shocking to all of us. In the past, when the river dried in Albuquerque, that's because all the water could be diverted for irrigation, for example, but there was still water upstream, stored in reservoirs on the Chama River, a tributary of the Rio Grande. Today, those same reservoirs, Heron Lake is standing at only 17% full. El Vado, which is under construction, is at 2% full. Abiquiu, 51%. I looked back at the data, and those 3 reservoirs are currently holding a quarter what they did in 1983, the last time the river is said to have dried in the Albuquerque stretch. Meanwhile, downstream, Elephant Butte Reservoir, the largest in our state, is at 4% capacity. Caballo Reservoir, 9%. There are many reasons for the drying, and much of the river is still diverted for irrigation, for example. But the simplest way to explain the drying is the Rio Grande has too many demands placed upon it, especially now in our warmer climate. We'll keep covering New Mexico's rivers. This week, I talk with University of New Mexico Professor Emeritus Clifford Dahm. He's been studying desert rivers for decades, and he explains what river drying means for different species that call the river and its ecosystem home. Welcome back to the show, Professor Dahm.
Thank you.
So a few years ago, we were out in the Sandias with you talking about intermittent and ephemeral waterways. Today, we're talking about a perennial river, the Rio Grande, that has dried. As we're talking right now, the Rio Grande has dried for some significant stretches in the Albuquerque reach, near Socorro, and also near Las Lunas. I wanted to talk to you, since this is you're an expert in this field. Anyone can see the obvious facts as a river dries, impacts to fish, for example. Fish need water to survive. What are some of the other ways in which a drying river affects different species or the ecosystem as a whole?
Well, let me start by making one point that I think is important as background, and that is intermittent rivers that only flow part of the time are prevalent worldwide. There are more rivers miles worldwide that are intermittent than are perennial. We happen to live in New Mexico, and the one river that is so near and dear to so many of our hearts is the Rio Grande, and we think of the Rio Grande flowing through Albuquerque as being a perennial reach. It has dried before, so it does on occasion have intermittence. That intermittence is going to have effects on the biotic communities that are there. You mentioned the fish. But in addition, the riparian forest that is there is dependent on having a water table that's usually within 10 feet or of the surface. And if the water table starts to drop from this drying, we might see some degradation of particularly the willows and the cottonwoods. So that's another group that are vulnerable to the drying. You also have to remember that the drying is in the riverbed, and there is water in the ditches, there is water in the conveyance channels, there's water in the return flows. So there is water in the system, so that may keep the water table high enough that we will not have problems with the riparian forest, but we should keep an eye on them for sure. Many of the more mobile species, when a reach like this dries, will probably move to new territory. Others might have adaptations to, for example, laying eggs that will be resistant to the dry phase and then hatch again when the wet phase comes. So I think the one thing that we should be very cognizant of is that there are small habitats that are residual during these drying events. The drying events are usually fairly predictable. They go from very low flow to lots of puddles and pools to actual total dryness. And that transition gives some of the organisms time to come up with a strategy to get ready to to basically be successful over these dry stretches. One thing that I will always tell people is that rivers are resilient. They are some of the most resilient ecosystems in the world. I experienced this when Mount St. Helens erupted, and those systems came back much faster than the terrestrial ecosystems. So if we get water back in the system, I think you'll see rapid recovery. But right now, it is pretty nerve-wracking to watch a river that for 40 years has flowed through the Albuquerque Reach now go dry.
So what about some of the smaller animals, whether that's insects or amphibians, and how they kind of all relate to one another? And do we see changes in water quality, things like that?
Yeah, a lot of these organisms that maybe are less mobile often will look for a refugia. And that's one of the things I think is pretty important that we do during this drying phase, is that we should map potential refugia within the reaches. Are there oxbow lakes? Are there wetlands? Are there areas where groundwater still is percolating through and producing small rivulets in the active stream? Those are the places where these organisms will go. Some of the smaller organisms, certainly some of the aquatic insects and some of the plankton, they lay eggs that are pretty resistant to drying, and that they will hatch back up when they re-wet. So there are strategies that many of the organisms have. Birds have probably moved on to places where they have better habitat, and certainly the fish, those that are being stranded that are of concern are actually being captured and moved.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when a river system dries and re-wets, is that a different kind of impact than when it just stays dry for a long period of time?
Definitely. Intermittent rivers worldwide are quite numerous, and in terms of river miles, there's been a couple papers of late that basically points out that there are more miles of intermittent river worldwide than there is of perennial river worldwide. So this is not an uncommon occurrence. I was lucky enough to be part of a group that basically has scientists from Australia and from Europe and from South America. And these kind of systems occur worldwide. And in New Mexico, about 95% of our rivers are intermittent. And so it's the 5% that are perennial that we often focus upon. But the fact that they go dry and they wet up and they go dry and they wet up is something that biological communities can adapt to. The question is, how often is this going to happen? If this is just something that happens episodically, probably they adapt well. If this is going to become a long-term new normal, then likely more changes will be noticed.
And so as you're looking worldwide at systems that are either intermittent, that's just how they were naturally, or a system like the Rio Grande that's maybe becoming more intermittent, what are some of the impacts that we really need to anticipate and be thinking about? I mean, water resources are such a key concern right now.
And so limited also. There are a lot of places where this kind of intermittency has been studied, and the Australians probably lead the way because they've got a continent that is overwhelmingly xeric or dry. These wetting and drying events help the organisms that have learned how to adapt, and it's actually something that becomes predictable in their life history. Having 40 years without flow in the Albuquerque Reach, it'll be very interesting to see which organisms can fend off this dry spell versus those that have a substantive reduction in their populations. Like I say, some of the sentinels that I would look at are the riparian tree species. Are we going to see willow and cottonwood die back? And are we going to see replacement by things like invasive species like Siberian elm and like saltseed? That would be one thing certainly to look at. And then other aquatic insects and fish species would be very important to be part of the analysis.
So we're talking about how non-human species adapt. I'm curious what you think about how human species might need to adapt to this sort of warmer, drier climate in New Mexico.
One of the things that we should start out pointing out is that this drying that is occurring in the Rio Grande, it's happening all over the world. This is a byproduct of a warmer Earth, and this is a byproduct of heat waves, and this is a byproduct of human needs for water competing with ecosystem needs for water. So this is happening all over the world, and the fact that it's happened here in our hometown is something that galvanizes people's interest, and hopefully will also allow us to begin the dialogue, and it's a difficult dialogue, of how do we utilize our precious and limited water resources.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Professor Dahm, for joining me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.